What's up, y'all? It's Izzy and I'm back with another video. I hope that the nighttime sounds of crickets and cicadas, like the female cicadas in particular, are serendipitous to your ears. I think that's the word, if not major oopsies. So this is one of the first episodes in the So You Think You Want to Build a Skoolie electrical disclaimer I am not an electrician series. I promise it won't be that big of a mouthful every time I talk about it. I just want to put that disclaimer here. So, disclaimer, I am not responsible if you follow my directions / take inspiration from me and it results in injury, harm, or damage to your bus, etc, etc, etc. So, today it's not going to be so much weary, like this can't really hurt so much. I'm just going to talk about electrical planning, so like planning out your electrical map. So find your handy dandy Skoolie floor plan. So mine's a little bit soaked because I had a mishap in the back where the window was like undone from the top and the wind blew really hard while it was raining. I think it was one of the hurricanes that came through, that's what it was. And so it made this really cool pattern. So first and foremost, when you're taking into consideration electrical mapping, like the basics of electricity and like any RV camper is likely you're going to have 12 volt and 110. If you don't know what this means, I will talk about the difference between AC and DC power later on, but just I'm doing this logistically for people who already kind of have a grasp on that, because if you've made it this far, I'm assuming you know the difference. But if you don't, really quickly, AC is alternating current, DC is direct current. DC is usually what comes from solar power, like a direct current is what you'll have from solar. AC is usually what is in a house. DC is most often used in automobiles, but most of the time in campers, especially in motorhomes, RVs, travel trailers, you'll have a combination of both of the things. That's why if you get a electrical panel for an RV, it'll come with both AC and DC hookups. You could probably do your entire bus in direct current, DC current, and get DC appliances, but you can't do everything 110. So, friendly disclaimer. Recap on that really quick for the people who may have got lost. Basically, if you're going to be building out a bus, you're going to have both AC and DC current on, but you might exclusively only have DC current going on, but you'll figure that out as you go. Personally, for me, I have both AC and DC electricity in the bus. I know that I would say that like for most people that's what you'll have, but I feel like it's almost just as common to only have direct current in your bus as it is to have both direct and alternating current in your bus. So I'm not going to exclude anyone. So what I did is I took my floor plan, as you can see, and I laid out where everything needed to be. So I made sure to denote what wires were going to be 12 volt, what wires were 110, which 12 volt is DC, 110 is AC. And I just kind of went crazy with where I knew I needed outlets at and where I knew specific things were going to be. Like these right here are my puck lights, which are what I'm using right now, so you'll get to see a little bit of us doing that later. And back here I'm reusing the lights that came in the bus, and so I knew that was going to be DC. For example, I have a pump underneath my couch here that was going to be on DC, a fan for my composting toilet that I knew was going to be DC, and I think that kind of finished me up for DC, and I knew everything else was going to be AC. So the biggest tip that I can give you is, since this is your bus, you only know what you're going to be using and where you're going to be putting things, so you kind of get to choose wherever you want outlets. So if you're in your home and you always wondered like, why did they put outlets here, like I really need this outlet specifically here, or why can't there be more outlets in this room, like there's just never enough outlets to plug in. This is where it comes in the fun part, because if you're wiring your own bus, you get to choose how many outlets you want and where you're going to exactly place them, so it makes it a lot easier on you in the long run. Probably, maybe, possibly, hopefully. But don't go too crazy with putting outlets everywhere that you're going to be plugging heavy, hefty things into, because that could overload your circuits and cause the breaker to flip. That's the case most of the time. I'll talk about it a little bit later with like 30 amp and 50 amp, like what's the difference in choosing the electrical boxes and stuff, hookups for your bus if you're going to be on grid sometimes. I'll talk about the differences in that, but basically a lot of people like to go with 50 amp because they can run like basically their air conditioner and cook at the same time, like air conditioner and microwave at the same time. That's like one of the big reasons there. So like you can overload your circuits if everything's going at once on a specific circuit. So what I recommend doing is, depending on how many circuits you're going to have in your load center, which your load center is like your breaker box where all your breakers are going to be at. Specifically for mine, I think I only had 4 in here, and the 5th one went to the actual power coming in. So the other 4, I knew I wanted to split up evenly. So there are things that are going to take a lot more electricity than other things. So for example, your refrigerator and your microwave, those are going to take a lot of power. And so what I decided is to put those on a different circuit than my hot water heater that was going to go underneath my sink, because I didn't want to risk the breaker flipping. Another thing that you might want to consider when you're electrical mapping is in places that water might get into. So I just mentioned my hot water heater, and I'm having like my turtle tank right here, and it's actually a tote, but it's going to be filled with water, and in my bathroom there's going to be water. So what I decided to do there was put some of the GFCI outlets, and so those will flip on their own if water or something was to get into them. So that's always good to have in areas like that. So that's something else you want to keep in mind when you're laying out your electrical. Places that are probably going to may get water on them, make sure that you put that specific type of outlet there. I think in most homes that's standard. In my home, my papa, not the papa I'll talk about a lot, but my other grandfather wired a lot of it, and we do not have GFCI outlets. At least there's not one in my bathroom. So, but it's a safety measure, and you should definitely go with it. And then there's things that'll change over time, but just kind of keep things in mind. Like I wanted to put like a 110 light here. That didn't end up happening because there's just not space for it. It's not feasible to do that. But you always just kind of like, when you're mapping out your electrical, just kind of be conscious of the activities you're going to be doing every day in those areas, and what would be the easiest for you to access, because at the end of the day, you're the one putting electricity in your bus, and you're the one that gets to make these decisions. And also make sure that to not forget, you know, a couple things that have to be put up. And it's good to have this before you start closing in ceilings, before you start closing in walls, because you need to run the wires through the ceilings if you're going to put like something like puck lights in, like I did here, or in specific parts of the walls that might be hard to get to if you close them up first. So just keep that in mind, like when you are working on your bus, that this should be one of the first things you sit down to do before you start putting in insulation and trying to close up walls. Make sure you have everything mapped out so you know where the wires need to be ran, you know where things are going, so later on you won't have to fish it through. Now I ended up having to fish through this light because I forgot to account for it when I was putting up the ceilings. Mostly I think because I didn't have the 12 gauge wire for the 110 or the AC current yet. And so what I ended up doing was having to fish it down. And now that wasn't particularly hard, but if it had been something in a more like difficult place to get to, it would have been more difficult. So just try to keep that in mind, and I think you should be okay. So just to recap, I guess this video is more about tips of doing your electrical map. Have your floor plan on hand. Always maybe put more outlets than what you think you're going to use, but don't overload your circuits. So don't put too many big appliances on one circuit. And if you need help with all of the big terms that I'm using, I will talk about circuits a little bit later. I just wanted to break these videos down into least information as possible so that you can watch them comprehensively instead of like it being one big blah, because that's what I'll end up doing. And don't overload your circuits, and make sure you have everything planned before you start closing up walls and ceilings and floors, because that will be so helpful, I promise. And I hope this video was helpful in some capacity to someone. It's a little bit impromptu because I haven't had a lot of time this week to get everything done. I've been working like crazy out here trying to get things done. Yeah. So, alright. Thank you guys so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more of my videos, or stay tuned for more of my videos, I guess I should say, because there's always more of my videos up that you can check them out on this wonderful channel. And at the end I'll have a link to all my other So You Think You Want to Build a Skoolie series, and I'll start a new playlist for the electrical videos for you guys to keep track of as well. And yeah, thank you guys, bye.